They may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom. That line from Braveheart was uttered by William Wallace, but it was created by Randall Wallace, the screenwriter and director. As the landmark film turns 30, Randy joins me to reveal the secrets of its origins and the life lessons he collected along the way, all on this edition of the Arroyo Grande Show. Come on. I'm Raymond Arroyo. Welcome to Arroyo Grande. Go subscribe to the show now. Go ahead, do it. Turn the notifications on. We've got some great interviews coming up and commentary, and we'd so appreciate a like, just so others can enjoy the show too. Now to our deep dive. This year marks the 30th anniversary of Braveheart, the beloved Academy Award-winning film. It was Randy Wallace who first discovered the story and wrote the screenplay. He would go on to write and direct The Man in the Iron Mask, Secretariat, We Were Soldiers, and many more. I talked with him about how he came to write Braveheart at one of the darkest points in his life, and how we can all live the Braveheart life. Watch. I'm going to start with the question that I'm sure is on everybody's mind, and it was on my mind. Where did Braveheart originate? I know you were on a trip to Scotland, and you see this statue of William Wallace, and you know and think what?
I was looking for my heritage, and this had a particular value. There was a real drive in this quest because we were expecting our first son, and his mother knew all of her ancestry because she has ancestors who were Latter-day Saints. So they had studied ancestry back and forth, and they knew it back hundreds and hundreds of years, and I knew nothing about mine. So part of it was trying to connect with a kind of history. I mean, all of us go back to Adam and Eve, right? But the sense that I wanted to know, to give him a sense of his heritage, that was a big part of it. But it wasn't just what is your physical genetic heritage. Like, what is your spiritual, emotional heritage? That's what I was looking for. And that's the moment that I came across William Wallace.
And we don't know a lot about William Wallace. We know nothing of what he said, right?
Nothing. In fact, it's really a funny thing. On the Air Force Academy, on the wall of the Air Force Academy, is a plaque that says, "They may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom." And under it is William Wallace. And I go, William Wallace didn't say that.
Randall Wallace said that.
Yeah.
Is that kind of, that has to kind of, you have to smile when you see that, because everything we know of William Wallace really comes through your pen.
Well, I tell you, there is a thing about it too, in that I feel that his story spoke to me, but it wasn't mine. I mean, as I wrote Braveheart, I had no outline. I had no historical records to draw from. I just sat down and wrote, and the story told itself to me.
Robert the Bruce, all of that was fabricated?
So I sat down and I wrote the story without any historical records to refer to. After I was in about draft 5 or 6, I discovered a book that is in rhyming Scottish verse and purports to be an epic poem about William Wallace that was told by a man named Blind Harry, who was not blind.
And probably not named Harry.
Probably not. And he traveled the Scottish Highlands, and he told this story in rhyming couplets, which enabled him to remember this epic poem. And I was already, 5 or 6 drafts into Braveheart when I read that book, and there were elements in that book that I had written in my screenplay.
Wait a minute.
Yes.
Which were they? Do you remember?
William Wallace encounters Robert the Bruce on the battlefield and discovers that the man that he has put the most trust in has betrayed him. Yes, absolutely.
Wow. And you had no contact with it in those 5 drafts?
William Wallace meets the princess, who historically was far younger, but actually and I had that, he meets the princess in my story. In the actual Blind Harry story, he meets the wife of Edward Longshanks, who was in fact the appropriate age. But I kept my version of the story because I had 2 hours in which to tell the story. So in a sense, all of history is an impressionistic work, but I felt that what I was telling was the truth. I always say, don't let the facts get in the way of the truth.
Of a good story.
Yeah, of a good story, yeah.
Now, you say, if I'm remembering this right, that you had a Braveheart moment when you were working on the script.
Yes.
And what that is in your fashioning is a desperate moment, a kind of rock bottom, gut check moment.
Yes.
Tell me about that moment, and why do you describe it that way?
So when I was about 11, my father, who was the strongest and bravest man I ever knew, had a nervous breakdown. His father was dead before he was born. My father's father died of typhoid fever 8.5 months before my father was born. So I'm not even sure that my grandmother, in fact, I'm pretty sure she did not know that she was pregnant when her husband died. So she was a widow before she was a mother. And my father grew up without a father. And his grandfather was a wonderful man and raised him, but he grew up without a dad, which was another reason that I had lost the Wallace chain in my...
In your heritage, you didn't
heritage. When my father was in his 30s, the company that he worked for, he had worked full-time since he was 14.
A salesman.
A salesman. And a bunch of guys bought the company that he worked for, which was the Curtis Candy Company. They made Baby Ruths and Butterfingers. And they decided they were going to flip the company, and they would increase their profits by firing all the old guys who were making higher salaries. And my father was one of the old guys. He was 38. The only time he'd ever lost a job, and it just crushed him. He really had a struggle with that, and he had a nervous breakdown. Now, he put his life back together. The last sale he made for the Curtis Candy Company was for $90,000. Now, that was in 1961. $90,000 was like, close to $1 million. The next sale he made was for 90 cents. But he worked his way back into enormous success. And I got to see that, but I also had the experience of my father falling apart and the terror. My sister and I were farmed out to relatives at that point. Our mother was very courageous, and so was our father, but it was a real upheaval. Wow. We lived in a house with no indoor plumbing for a while. And so cut to my career has begun. I was making a lot of money in television. My career kept expanding. And then there was a huge writer's strike, and I had a falling out with my mentor, both at the same time. When the strike was over, my job was gone. The company that I worked for, it was beginning to evaporate. I'd had a long-term contract, but the Writers Guild had going on strike allowed companies to suspend the contracts. I'd spent all my savings on buying a new home for my children, our children, to grow up in. Yeah. And suddenly, here's a strike, and I'm out of money. I'm out of prospects. I can't even get a job. I can't even get an opportunity to pitch a story. All the doors were shut. And I was all knotted up. And I thought I was about to put my sons through the same horror that I had gone through. I thought I was going to come apart. And the only place I could go was on my knees. And I said a prayer. And the prayer was, maybe the best thing for my sons is not that they grow up in a house with a bunch of bedrooms and a tennis court and swimming pool and German cars in the driveway. Now, maybe the best thing for them is they live in a little house the way my sister and I did. And they have an outhouse. They have no indoor plumbing. maybe they'll be better men. And if that's what God wants from my sons, then please bring it on and help me bear it. But if I go down in this fight, help me go down not on my knees to Hollywood, but standing up, fighting for what I believe, with my flag flying, writing what I want my sons to see. And that led directly to Braveheart.
Wow. How long did it take you to write?
It was actually very quick. From when I first heard the story to when I sat down to write it was 10 years, because I didn't feel, when I saw this statue of William Wallace standing next to a statue of Robert the Bruce, and as you say, I had not heard of William Wallace. Yeah. So I asked a member of the Black Watch, Scottish guards there at Edinburgh Castle, who he was, and the guard said, he's our greatest hero. And I'm thinking, now, how can he be the greatest hero of Scotland? And I share his name, and I love history, and I've never heard of him. How could that be? And so I said, well, he and Robert the Bruce, I knew of Robert the Bruce, Scotland's greatest king. So they must have been allies fighting against the English. And this guard said, well, no one will ever know for sure, which of course is the magic words for a writer.
For a writer, that's right. Open the door.
But our legends say that Robert the Bruce may have been among those who betrayed William Wallace into the hands of the English to clear the way for himself to become the king. And that was when the lightning bolt struck me. It's like I thought, this may be the greatest story that I've ever heard, because it's like being told St. Peter and Judas were the same person. What if there was something so noble in the life and death of William Wallace that it transformed Robert the Bruce from a man who would betray his country's greatest hero to becoming his country's greatest king? And that was like, okay, this is huge, but I'm not ready to do it yet. I've got a baby coming. I need to find a way to feed him, a reliable way. I need to grow as a writer so that I'm capable of handling this kind of inspiration. But I probably wouldn't have sat down to do it had not I been at a point of...
If you had all that other work, you wouldn't have done it. There's something to be said about burning the boats.
Right, yes.
You know, where that's your one path. This is the only option.
That's right. Everything was stripped away. I had no choice.
You know, Mel recently told me the story on this show about finding the script. He had read the script, he had read Braveheart, but it was at a different studio. I guess Alan Ladd had it.
Yes.
Or that studio did. And Mel kept repeating it in his head, he told me. He kept seeing the scenes and what was happening. And later he was looking for, I guess, a project, and he asked them to pull it out of storage, which they did. And he reread it, and it was very different from what he was imagining in his head. But he asked Alan Ladd if he could have it. Is that the story? Is that how you remember it?
Well, so everyone has their, the experience of where they were when it was happening. I wrote it with no producers involved at all, only with Rebecca Pollock, who worked for Alan Ladd. And she's the daughter of Sidney Pollock, and she inherited her father's genius. I mean, Sidney Pollock was one of the great filmmakers of all time. And Becky really has his instincts. And I pitched the story to her in about 10 minutes, and she went, my God, go write that. And I wrote it, and then she said, okay, we've never seen this happen before. We Xeroxed the script and sent it to all the department heads to read, and their assistants read it first. And they're all sitting out in the area where all the assistants sit, and they're all weeping. And I've never seen this happen. So who can play William Wallace? And I said, there's only one person. There's only one actor in the world that I think can do it, and that's Mel Gibson. So we got to go after him. If he says no, I don't know what we do, but we have to go after him. And we did have the experience where we sent it and didn't hear. And then I got a phone call from my agent saying, are you sitting down? I said, no. Well, sit down. I go, well, what is it? And he goes, well, Mel Gibson wants to meet you for breakfast. And we met at the Four Seasons, and we're sitting there, and I had said a prayer that I would not kiss his butt. Like Raymond, you know how when people are around powerful people, there's a valence of that where people tend to try to say whatever they think that person wants to hear.
Right.
And that to me is the way to hell. Like you have to, my only value to myself, to my family, to Mel, to God was tell him the truth.
Right.
So we sat down and everybody was really nervous. And Mel broke the ice in that meeting. He looked across the table and he said, and we're sitting across just like you and me. And he said, so William Wallace, Randall Wallace, are you guys like relatives or what? And that was a great icebreaker, you know, because I got to say, well, I can't prove I am, but nobody can prove I'm not. You know, so, but in 5 minutes, I was like a tent revivalist, and I was leaning across the table and I was beating on the table with my fist. And I said, here's the way it is. Every movie has a message, has its underlying message. And the underlying message of most movies, the subtext, is if you have the guy with the bluest eyes and the cutest dimples and the biggest biceps and the most charming smile, he's the one that gets the girl. This movie says, if you're faithful to your heart, even if they cut it out of your chest, you prevail. Now that's the movie I want my sons to see. That's the movie I want the world to see. You want to make that movie, you need to say yes. You don't want to make that movie, you need to say no.
And he said?
And nobody said anything. Everybody at the table went, except Mel. And he leaned forward. And I think, this guy and I are we're gonna go. And so nobody else says anything. They won't look at me. Nobody says anything. And Mel is massively aware of his surroundings without looking at them. It's kind of a spooky thing. But he didn't look at me. Nobody did. We go out, we get our cars. You know, they're all in expensive cars.
Well, that was it. He didn't agree to it at the table.
No. And we're riding away. My cell phone rings. It's my agent. And he goes, what the heck did you say? And I think he's angry. And I go, well, somebody had to talk. Nobody's talking. I just like, and he said, no, the Alan Ladd just called. And he said, I want to double Randy Wallace's deal. Instead of one more script from him, I want 2 more. And I want him to direct the next thing he writes for us. And he said, I don't know what you said, but whatever it was, you know, keep doing it. Well, Mel doesn't say yes. He doesn't say yes. And I don't know what the hang up is. So I went to Scotland on my own, or actually with my wife, on my own dime. And I found the battle reenactors who were in Highlander, and they were called the Clan Wallace. A friend of mine who worked on Highlander said, they're these crazy Scots. He said, we had 3 broken noses after we yelled cut. Hey, those are my guys.
Those are your guys.
So went over there, took pictures of them, took a slideshow, took video of them fighting, which was easy to find because they fought all the time. And I came back and showed them to Alan Ladd. He said, you got to show this to Mel. And we sat down and I showed him to Mel, and he looked at it all silently, like with his eyes like this. And then he looked up at me and said, I want to direct this. What would you think of that? And that was what I believe that was the thing that he took a long time to come to, is that he knew in his heart that he could just knock this ball, like this was him. But it was also huge. He had done Man Without a Face, which was an intimate,
film,
intense movie. This was this. So when he said that, I went, I will support that 100%. And we were off to the races.
And the rest was history. Amazing. When you wrote it, I mean, look, for so many, you talked about the Air Force Academy, they've got the quote on the wall. For so many men in particular, it embodies a masculine ideal and the sacrificial savior.
Yes.
I'm sure you were aware of those themes as you wrote this.
Well, it's funny. People have said to me, you know, you must have done a lot of research. And I say, yeah, I did. I read the New Testament. And the interesting thing about it, Raymond, is that Mel, among all the actors who we could have gone to, got that instantly. And I mean, oh, this is the Garden of Gethsemane. Oh, this is, you know, he
saw through it all.
He saw it all. And so that was a bond that we found, that we had together, and persists to this day. But the weird thing is, God's plan is better than your plan. So when something surprises you, you don't see it coming. I mean, one of the first things Mel said to me in our first meeting was, "Tell me all the things you wrote and took out." Now, by my way of thinking, that's genius. No, I've never heard anybody else say that to a writer. But it was an interesting, creative approach. It was almost like a uniquely brave and wild approach to filmmaking, which I think characterizes him.
No, he told me. He said, I was reading it. He said, I read it. I said, oh, no, not now. And he said, I couldn't get it out of my head. He said, but I was envisioning, I could see the scenes.
Yeah.
And he said, and then later I went, and that's why I think he wanted to direct it, because he saw things.
Yeah.
He saw things that you had suggested. He saw things he wanted to deepen. He saw things that, and that's probably why he asked the question. He was looking for your discards to see what he could reanimate, probably.
Yeah.
Give me a sense of, I mean, looking back now, it's easy to see, but the path had to be difficult. I mean, when you're broke, when you don't know where your next meal's coming from, when nobody's buying, that's a rough moment to be in as a writer or a creative.
Yeah, it is. Yes.
How did you get through that? I mean, besides falling on your knees.
I think there's not much besides that, actually. I mean, you can have wonderful people in your life, as I certainly did and do, who are there for you in every possible way they can be there for you. And I had plenty of them.
Yeah.
But, there's an old spiritual from the South. You got to walk that lonesome valley. You got to walk it by yourself, and nobody else can walk it for you. And there was that element for me of, okay, I've done everything I know to do. Now I'll just fall into the arms of God and let it go.
But you had fallen into the arms of God a little earlier, actually, because you go to Duke to study divinity. I mean, you're studying religion.
Yes.
What did your father, the salesman, what did Thurman think of that?
Thank you for calling my father's name. It always makes me smile. My father, I think, had a sense that my calling was not in the clergy. I had been, and I actually never felt that I was, in sort of evangelical circles, and that's where I come out of and still am. There's a sense that God called you, that you have, vocation. There's this calling, and God calls you in sometimes gentle ways and sometimes overwhelming ways, but you gotta listen to the call. And I loved the study of religion, but I never imagined that I would be a pastor, but I had no idea what I would be. So when I was majoring in religion and I was about to graduate and was thinking I would do one more year in seminary to try to get even deeper. And I wanted to study the resurrection. I wanted to do all those things. And I wanted to explore being a writer. And I thought that this would give me a chance to have the room to do that as a seminarian. My pastor, the pastor of the church I grew up in, said to me, "Do you feel the call to be a pastor?" And I said, "Honestly, I don't, but I know it's the greatest calling anyone can ever have." And he said, "Well, you're wrong. The greatest calling you can have is the one God has for you." And that was one of the most powerful moments, and one of the most beautiful moments, I have to say, where a man that I respected, he was a fantastic pastor, but he wasn't trying to herd me into his path. It was like, follow your own path. It's like what a father, I think, should say to his children.
How did that training prepare you as a writer? Because I know you're interested in music at this point.
Oh, yeah.
So you're writing music, not the written word, but the written song.
That's right.
And you can clarify the story, but Chris Christopherson is coming to Duke.
Yes.
And you connived to get close to him.
Yes. So he's a Rhodes Scholar. He's an airborne ranger. He's a Golden Gloves boxer. And he writes these incredibly brilliant songs. So that's kind of my decision-making formula, is find someone that you admire and relate to and see what they do. And I had seen that Chris Christopherson had gone to Nashville, which I didn't feel was my natural place. I was writing more like, say, Cat Stevens or Neil Diamond.
Pop music.
Yeah, pop music, more pop music and less kind of country music. But Chris Christopherson had brought this poetry and this masculine energy into a context that was quite poetic and really embraced. I mean, country music is mainly lyrics.
Yes,
and it's adult lyrics.
And stories.
Like, the bubblegum thing, I'm 14 and I just saw a girl. That is a very pop music kind of thing. But I'm a man. I'm struggling how to be a father, a husband, and in all of my brokenness and my mistakes. What made Milwaukee famous made a loser out of me.
Right.
That's country music.
That's country music, yeah.
And Christopherson brought that, and I got to meet him. My dad felt the same way about the seminary as he felt about me being a writer, which was he thought neither one of those was safe. And he wanted me to be a lawyer. I had crushed the law school admissions test. I had I had a chance to have scholarships and everything else. And I'd always sort of thought I would be a lawyer, but it didn't feel, it wasn't calling to me the way creating things was, writing was, and music did. So
you're in Nashville. What happens in Nashville?
So in Nashville, I was working at a theme park called Opryland, working 80 hours a week. I loved it, but I was getting up at 4:30 every morning to write songs. And I got signed as a songwriter to a company called Tree Music.
Yeah.
And there's a funny thing, Raymond. I shared this story with Jordan Peterson when I was talking with him, that I had decided that I wasn't as committed as I needed to be. And I got that impression from two things. One, I wasn't selling songs in Nashville, and I felt, okay, I'm not being disciplined enough about being productive enough, finding my. I wrote more songs than anybody at Tree was writing at the time, but they were writing better songs. Like a guy, Bobby Braddock was there. Yeah. He wrote "He Stopped Loving Her Today."
I just thought of that earlier when you were talking about heartbreak, and that's such a great song.
Oh, it's one of the greatest songs ever written.
Yeah,
and so those guys, I was thinking, okay, I've got to really up my game to keep up with these guys. But there's also the not trying to keep up with other people. What's the best Randall I can be? And I had a picture of Beethoven. It's a classic Beethoven picture of him holding a manuscript, and he's kind of frowning up and so intense. And I thought, I'm going to try to be that guy. And I quit my job. I'd saved up money. I was sleeping on the floor. I spent no money for furniture or anything. I just paid rent. Rent and food was all I had. And I spent all day long writing, practicing, studying music, and not seeing anybody. And at the end of about 3-4 months, I was nearly insane. I was there was a day in Nashville when I realized the sun had not come out in 14 days. And if I didn't see some sunshine, I was afraid I was going to kill myself. And I thought, I've got to get out of here. I've got to go. And I packed up everything I could carry in my little car, and I drove to California alone.
And that was it.
That was it.
How did you get involved with Stephen Cannell? Which is and now you're writing. You segue into writing TV. Yeah. He was the big TV producer.
Yeah, he was writer. Awesome. I mean, a massive mentor and friend. I mean, he was an amazing human being. I met him because having nothing to do except write, I couldn't write all day. I'd learned in Nashville that if I tried to write all day, I would drive myself insane. And I needed to be around other people. But I wanted something healthy to do. And I found, well, okay, a gym membership is the cheapest thing you can do. I went to the gym every single day and worked out like a madman. And I've always loved working out. But I was in the gym one day and there was a guy helping a friend. He was a real strong guy and he was helping a sort of out of shape friend, trying to encourage him to lift and be healthier. And they were clearly musicians because they were talking about music, and this guy was telling stories about Elvis. And I piped up and said, hey, you know, I grew up in Memphis and my father saw Elvis get paid $50 to open a supermarket, you know, sing while the supermarket was, and we start talking and the guy goes, do you run? And I said, oh, you know, I ran in college, but I don't run much. And he goes, well, we got a running group every weekend. Come out and run with us. And okay, great. And we exchanged names. And I said, I'm Randy Wallace. And he goes, I'm Mike Post. And I go, wait, Mike Post? The music Mike Post? He goes, yeah, that's me. I mean, total down-to-earth guy, but the most successful and probably most brilliant TV composer ever. And Mike made it his business to get Steve to read my scripts. And Steve kept saying, you know, it's like there are thousands of guys trying to get me to read the scripts, and Mike would not take no for an answer, and then got me to see Steve, and Steve was doing a show about country people, and I told him a story about my grandfather that made him laugh, and he said, "Well, we'll give you a shot."
And that was it?
And that was it. Yeah, I became his protege.
Wow. How long were you there?
4 years.
4 years.
Yeah.
And then you run up into this Braveheart moment.
Yeah, that's right.
You've said Braveheart could not have been written except for my mother. Why?
Well, so my father was a salesman, and like I've said, I never knew anybody who had more charisma and charm and grit than my dad, with the exception of my mother, probably. That my mother my father had the attitude that every person had a value and was due respect. So when he went into a company, and he went into hundreds and hundreds of them, he knew the name of the president. He knew the name of the person that answered the phone for the president, but he knew the name of the guy that swept the floors. Every single place. He knew that guy's children. He knew where the guy lived. He knew what the guy loved to do. And it wasn't a tactic. He just actually loved people like that. Now, my mother had a different sort of take on it. She believed that everybody could be loved by God, but she didn't have to love everybody. Because you might be unlovable. Yeah. And her attitude was, if everyone likes you, you're probably doing something wrong. In fact, to jump ahead for a moment, when we had made We Were Soldiers, and my father had just passed away. My father died on 9/11.
Oh my God.
And that was how I came to write the hymn, Mansions of the Lord.
Mansions of the Lord, yeah.
And I was calling my mother every day in those days to, you know, just check in on her. And of course, I guess I needed to hear her voice as much as she needed to hear mine. But we were about to do the first test screening, you know, that you show the movie and then you show it to an audience, and no matter how confident you are, you got a real, you know, knot in your stomach. Yeah. And I was talking with my mother. I said, "How you doing, Mom?" And she said, "I'm fine. How are you?" And I said, "Well, I'm nervous today." And she goes, "Why?" And I said, "Well, we're having and she's from Tennessee, right? Farm girl. And I said, "Well, we're having the first test screening of We Were Soldiers." And she said, "Well, why would that make you nervous?" And I said, "Well, Mama, you know, if you put your blood, your sweat, your tears, and your money into a movie, And there are going to be some people that really have their knives out. They just want to tear you down. And my mother goes, well, honey, if they crucified Jesus Christ, there are going to be some people that don't like you.
Get over it.
It's like, that's her attitude. It's like, yeah, some people will not, but do what you believe doing. And that thing in Braveheart, like when it comes to every man dies, not every man really lives. We certainly think of that kind of line about our fathers, and it says man in it, but it's certainly as true about every.
For you, it was your mother.
My mother, yeah.
Wow. Why did The Three Musketeers so appeal to you? The Man in the Iron Mask, one of my favorite movies ever. No. And I've told you before, my boys and I used to watch it. They loved that movie because it's filled with adventure. It has the same heart and soul and moral DNA that Braveheart has, frankly. What was the appeal there?
Gosh, Raymond, it's funny. No one's ever asked me this, and I'm so excited to get to say this. Yeah. So Braveheart is my first produced feature, and it becomes this worldwide
sensation.
Thing. And I realized that if what I tried to do was copy that again and again, that I was over. That I had to actually trust that what brought me to Braveheart was going to bring me to other things. And I had to be willing to let go and not say, well, I'm going to just repeat this. Now, Hollywood likes repetition because it makes it feel more predictable and understandable. Okay, we've put you in this historical box. But what happened with Man in the Iron Mask is Becky Pollock, again, like, her dad made Jeremiah Johnson, and 3 Days of the Condor, and all these other great movies, but those two are my particular favorite. And she called me up and said, Man in the Iron Mask, what do you think? And I had loved that story since I was a boy. I mean, the mysterious nature of it, right? Who is he? Why is he in the Iron Mask? All of that. Yeah. So I called her and said, I'm in, I want to do it. But what really appealed to me was that the thematics of that story were that these musketeers, the four of them actually, the three then plus D'Artagnan, those guys were in a certain way past their prime in that they had been famous in their 20s. Now they were sort of retired. One's a Jesuit, one's a dad, one's just in dissipation, and then D'Artagnan is the captain of the King's Guard. Right. And in that story was the same thing that I faced of, okay, if you've done something that the world didn't know me, they knew Mel, but they didn't know much about me. That wasn't the point. The point was I could keep trying to live in the past, or I could say what brought me here has something else for me to do. And that's where Man in the Iron Mask, that was the theme really of Man in the Iron Mask.
And you directed it too.
I did.
Which is, that's the first movie you directed, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Wow. Yeah. It's such a great movie. It still holds up. I watched it recently.
Thank you.
But I see the same themes, but it's not the same movie.
Right.
You're right. It's very different. And it's a lot of fun too.
Yeah.
I think it's hilarious and a delightful movie. Do you outline?
No.
Not at all?
No, I don't believe in it.
You just launch in writing?
I actively disagree with outlining.
Why?
Because the way you determine whether an outline is good or bad, it's whether it sounds like something you've seen before.
That's true. That's true.
And I'm trying to find a story that I have not ever heard before. I'm not trying to replicate. I don't want to be copying.
Yeah.
So again, like I say, take Braveheart. If it hadn't been someone like Mel who had bitten hard on the bait of Braveheart, if some other actor had come in and said, "Oh well, love the story, but but my friend should swing in on vines and save me in the end. I can't die. Then the studio would have gone, yes, you're right.
Absolutely. We need a happy ending. What the hell are you doing, Randy?
Yes, exactly. So it's like, you got to find the thing, or say, Murren's throat being cut.
Yeah.
Nobody did things like that. Yeah. And it wasn't me trying to be different. It was the story told itself to me in that way. And I want to listen to what the story is telling me.
In real time.
In real time. Now, while I'm writing, I'll get a projection of, oh, down the line, this will happen.
Yeah, and you make that note.
I'll write those. I'll write a little dialogue that I know is coming, but that's just to jog my memory. But I do not outline.
You do say a prayer, though, every day.
Oh, yeah.
What is that prayer?
Well, okay, I can tell you exactly what it is. So to prepare to write, I start with, I thank God for now and for this work. And I ask him to bless me in it and others through it, however it is his will. I pray to offer the work to him as he offers it to me, in faith and hope and love. And then I say the prayer of Jabez. Lord, I pray that you would bless me indeed, increase my territory, and that thy hand be upon me to keep me from evil, and that I cause no pain. And I thank God that God is God Almighty and Lord of all creation, and that I'm part of his creativity too. And for that I give thanks and I rejoice. And that's the way I start.
That's the beginning.
I have to say that first. Yeah.
You see yourself in every character.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You're playing all the parts.
Yes.
Yeah, I thought that was just me. I didn't realize you did that too. Well, but it's. I guess we're the instrument. You have to kind of. I mean, you only have one heart and one soul and one mind. I mean, you just sort of bend them, I guess, to the character in the moment.
Yeah, I think that there is something in all of us that recognizes the potential to do to do incredible evil and transcendent good. I think that is the nature of our lives.
Tell me about We Were Soldiers, speaking of transcendent good.
Yeah.
I knew Lieutenant Hal Moore, Lieutenant Colonel Hal Moore. He was such a heroic and great man. Yeah. How did you come across the story? You read the book, I imagine.
Yes.
And your thoughts on that film, looking back, and who he was, the type of man he was. And of course, it's your reunion artistically with Mel.
Yes. I was sitting in my office, the same office, home office that I was sitting in when I wrote Braveheart. And I was starting to work on Man in the Iron Mask. And the phone rang, and it was an executive at Warner Brothers who said, I nearly lost my job over Braveheart. And how was that? And she said, well, Mel is at Warner Brothers. He's on the studio lot with his company, and we're supposed to keep track of everything. And suddenly he announces he's doing this thing, Braveheart, and we weren't even aware of it. And I said, well, he could have been, I suppose. You just met, but she said, no, I'm not angry. But Kevin Costner has read Braveheart, and he wishes you had sent it to him, and he would like to meet you. And I took a moment and I said, I wish my father was here to hear me say this. I would love to go to Hawaii to meet with Kevin Costner, but I can't because I need to go to England to help Mel Gibson. She laughed and said, no, Kevin understands, but he's working on a movie called Waterworld. But he would like to see you, and we want to fly you over. So I went to the bookstore and was looking. I love to read nonfiction. It informs me, I think, more than, even though I love fiction, I write fiction. And here's this book, We Were Soldiers Once and Young.
Okay, yeah.
And there's a picture on the cover of a young lieutenant, platoon leader, with his bayonet fixed, leading his men into the brush. The guy's name was Rick Rescorla. You may know of Rick Rescorla, one of the great heroes of all time, and a guy I want to write about. But I picked up that book and I opened it on the plane and did not put it down the whole flight to Hawaii. And I came across in the preface, Hollywood has gotten the story of the Vietnam veteran wrong every damn time, whetting the knives of twisted politics on the bones of our dead brothers. And I was like, okay, wow, I am in. Now I get to the actual, people don't believe this, but are surprised by it. The scene that really put the nail in the coffin for me was a letter from a woman named Barbara Gagan, who was the wife of the guy who was a devout Catholic. He and Barbara had gone to Africa in Catholic relief services. He had postponed his Vietnam deployment so he could go be a missionary in Africa. He had been killed trying to pick up one of his wounded men and carry him off the battlefield. He had been killed too. And Barbara wrote a letter to Hal about her experience when he came to visit her. And it moved me to the core of my being. I got off the plane and I called my agent and I said, somebody has got to own the movie rights to this book. You tell them I'll kill a relative to get to write this story. And he said, I'll get right back to you. So he calls me the next day and says, they won't sell the movie rights because they're afraid Oliver Stone will end up with them, or it'll be turned into, you guys were baby killers and all of that. And so I said, okay, give me their number. And I called them. I got Joe Galloway, the journalist
himself,
and I said, you don't know me. I've written a script called Braveheart. I'm going to send it to you. It's currently in production, but you've never heard of my name. But you read it, and then if you like it, call me. So next day he calls and goes, okay, let's talk. So I said, I can go to a studio based on the success of Braveheart, and I can get them to
greenlight this,
but they will own it, and then they'll do anything they want to with it. If you will let me buy it with my own money, I'll pay you my own money to buy the movie rights. And I'll write you a deal that you'll make more money and success than you would have ever made from the studio. And if you don't like what I do, you'll know who to come shoot. And they went in. And then Hal proceeded to become one of the great mentors of my life. He was like a second dad.
Great man.
So yeah, great man.
Oh, great man. Every year, I went with him a couple of times when he would go to the Vietnam Memorial with his Rangers, and every year there would be less of them. And it was very moving.
They'll tear your heart out. Yes.
It was very moving.
Yeah.
Incredible men.
I went to the renaming ceremony when they renamed Fort Benning, and named it Fort Julie and Hal Moore. And I have to say, I appreciate, and in fact, I'm troubled by the destruction of history. The taking down of statues, whether you love them or hate them. History is history, and heritage is heritage, and many of those things are there for us to be provoked by. But I loved that they named that Fort Hal and Julie Moore, and no one ever deserved it or was more exemplary of the values that you want not only the soldiers but their families to have.
Are you amazed culturally the way it seems, I could be overstating, that masculinity is back? Young guys are finding their voice again. They're showing up, not always in comfortable or well-dressed or mannered ways, but they're willing to allow their voices to be heard.
Amen. Amen. I agree with you. It is amazing how it's happening. And I'll tell you just my personal reaction about that.
Yeah.
So again, I grew up not only with an amazingly gentle and powerful father, but an amazingly tough and elegant mother. She was very much like Julie Moore. And I always grew up with the belief that a man respecting women was the most masculine man there could be. I was doing a charity screening of Braveheart in Austin, Texas, about 10, 15 years ago. And it's the first time I'd seen the movie screened in a decade or more.
Wow.
And I watched it as an audience member. And then I went up on the stage to do a Q&A with the audience. I walk up there, and I was moved by the movie, to see it in that way. And the first one to stand up was a 19-year-old woman right on the front row. And she stood up and said, "Mr. Wallace, I don't have a question. I just want to tell you something. My fiance died 6 months ago. And before he died, he told me he wanted me to watch Braveheart so I would understand the way he loved me." And I couldn't talk for about 5 minutes. It was such a powerful example to me that strong women want strong men, and strong men want strong women. Strong doesn't mean overly macho. It doesn't mean trying to prove yourself. But to this day, and I always will, and I've taught my sons, you open doors for ladies, not because they're weak, but because you're telling them, you're honoring them. And that's what you do. And they hear that. My youngest son has picked up a habit from me that when I meet a woman that I think is due honor, I will kiss her hand. And invariably, it makes them glow. And he does it too. And I was like, yeah, that's how you treat a woman. So yeah, I want to see men valued, and no society that doesn't see a man as an honorable creature, and not that a man has to be like a woman, but a man has to share the heart of a woman, like the tenderness. A gentle, tender father is one of the most powerful things in the world.
Man in the world, yeah.
And so that's the thing that I'm thrilled to see that happening all over.
I'm intrigued about when Mel approached you about the resurrection. Was this 2016? Was it Hacksaw Ridge time? Was that
Yes,
the window?
and Mel didn't approach me. I approached him, actually.
Oh.
And now, this is not to say that over the years he hadn't thought many times about the resurrection. In fact, in the original Passion of the Christ, the original cut, he didn't have the resurrection scene.
Correct. Yeah.
And that, so he was getting feedback, I think, from people like, we really want to see that. So he shot a little kind of coda in that. So again, I'm not trying to take credit for this, but having studied the resurrection and being so consumed by it, I thought about it many times, and I didn't have anything to do with Passion of the Christ. When we were flying back to Washington, D.C. for a screening of We Were Soldiers, it was the first movie to be screened at the Bush White House.
Oh, yeah.
Mel was telling us the story of the Passion that he wanted to do in a real animated way. But all I did was just listen. I didn't have any input on that. But when we were promoting Hacksaw Ridge, and we were sitting there talking and about our lives, and that's one of the really awesome things to me about getting to know Mel. We've had some moments when it was just the two of us. We once talked in a hallway at Fort Benning, in a sort of barracks hallway at 2 a.m. when neither of us could sleep when we were prepping. We were soldiers. We'd bump into each other walking the hallways and talk for hours. And we've had a lot of great conversations in those moments. And we were having dinner while we were promoting Hacksaw Ridge. And I said, look, the story that you really need to tell is the resurrection. And there was this long pause. And he said something profoundly beautiful. He said, if we do this, it can't be for the money, and it can't be to get back at people that that have hated us or wronged us or been unhappy with us.
Yeah.
And said, amen to that. And then he said, Satan's going to come after you. And I said, Satan doesn't really care about Baptists. It's really good when Satan can get a Catholic, but
Baptists.
We're a dime a dozen. And of course, I was being facetious, but I was also thinking that.
What if he's right?
That's
what I would be thinking. What if he's right?
Well, we had a beautiful conversation about grace. And what I said was, first of all, thank you. You have a mass said for me. I appreciate it in my soul. What about you? What should we do for you? Yeah. And we had this great conversation about grace. That we in Catholicism, you have the duties of the rituals, that these are important. It's not to say, I don't believe it would be accurate to say that Catholics believe that the given ritual itself is the thing that does that has the efficacy. But
it's a vehicle of grace. The sacrament is a vehicle of grace.
A vehicle of grace. And now Protestants are without the formalities of it, but we believe in the same grace. And that God loves us while we don't deserve it. We can't come to deserve it. We do our best to live in the honoring of the love that God gave us before we deserved it. And we never will deserve it. So we had this great conversation about that, and that was the way we started. And I said, well, look, I knew that he had written The Passion, was very much deeply involved in the writing of it. Yeah. And I said, well, look, let's partner up, and I'll write a draft, give it to you, then we'll start tearing it up, go through it. You do your thing, I'll do my. We'll work together. We'll work apart. So we started that way, and then it's really, he has brought it. It's somewhat different than the way Braveheart was, in that I wrote the script, took it to him, but he had to take it apart in his head and put it back together in his head to direct it. And we were soldiers. He acted, and it was, I wrote it, I directed it, I produced it. Okay. Then in this, it's his unique vision of the spiritual realm is really special. And the interesting thing is that while in some ways the ultimate movie, I want to keep it all secret about what's going to happen. But the ultimate movie, in some ways, will have elements that people have never seen before. And in fact, in many ways, it'll be stuff nobody's ever seen. And yet, I believe it'll be in a certain way the most orthodox telling. It'll be the most consistent telling of the overall belief, the awe, and the mystery that Christians experience when they experience the resurrection.
What is the hardest part of this process? I mean, what is the most difficult? What's the hardest blockades that you've encountered, because you are dealing with a story that has so many unknowns surrounding them. You know, Jesus shows it, walks through a wall. I mean, he's on the road to Emmaus. Well, why don't they recognize
Yes,
him?
exactly, yes.
Why don't they know it's him?
Yes.
But how do you portray that on camera?
I think that the first internal challenge, I'm not sure how Mel would answer this question. It'd be fascinating to see how he does. Yeah. I'm sure you're going to talk with him. But there's a universal kind of truth about this and every other story. It's getting out of the way, getting yourself out of the way. And the other is getting in the way. That, as in, when I first wrote Braveheart, I didn't believe anybody was going to like it. I thought I would, but I didn't believe it.
Really? Nobody?
People have said to me, you had to know that people were going to love it. I was like, no, I did not. In fact, I believe no one was going to love it. It was, I wanted to write what was true for me.
For you.
That gets back to my mother. The other people, saying that somebody else did it is no excuse.
Right.
Saying that standard was high enough for them, that's good. That's high enough for them. It's not high enough for us. We have a different standard. So I think there's the thing of, does it move you?
Right.
And that's one of the things I would say about Mel in particular, that you see that his heart and his vulnerability are in his work. And they're certainly in mine. Like when I'm directing and the actors do something that brings tears to my eyes, I do not wipe them away. I go up to them and I get in their face and I let them see that they just moved me. I need them to know.
Yeah.
And
that's an important insight, though. He and you have that vulnerability, which people don't necessarily see, but that's at the heart of his art and yours.
Yeah, and that's a part that I think they. Again, I'm not here to speak for Mel, but I think it's something that people really miss about him is how incredibly tender and generous-hearted and that he really wants to live in the right way. And he certainly has his challenges, as we all do, to doing that.
Yeah.
But I've seen multiple cases in which he felt he had to settle directly with a person, and he doesn't do it through, like, if he's got a problem with somebody, I've seen him go up and say, please forgive me. I'm sorry. And people don't see that side. No. But it's quite real.
You said something I came across the other day. Actually, you told it to me years ago. I went through an old interview you gave me, and you said this: I'm thought of as the author of Braveheart, but this tale is the author of me.
Yeah.
Explain that.
Well, I think that there's something that happens when you speak the truth as you know it. Is that it is not a one-way flow. It is a loop. It is a divine loop. And that by standing up and saying what you truly believe, then that actually creates it again in you. It's like taking a vow.
Yeah.
You know, I wrote a song once, and I have thought of it recently because some relationships are changing in my life, and one in particular. And I wrote a song that had the lyric, what will it take if I follow my dream? Will it be just a little or everything? What will it mean if I give my all to a glorious climb or an endless fall? If I stood up and shouted, if I prayed on my knees, if I swore in defiance, if I said pretty please, would it all be the same if I come to the end with no promise to keep and no vow to defend? I will stand my ground. I will kneel and pray. I won't wait for tomorrow. I'll do it today. I'll die in the dirt, but my heart will be clean when I say yes to heaven and follow my dream. And that's what I believe. I believe that. I wrote that some years back, just came across it recently and went,
There it is.
there it is. What came out then spoke to me then and speaks to me in a different way now. What you do creates you as well as you create it.
And now you're touring the country, which I love. And you wrote a book called Living the Braveheart Life.
Yes.
Now you're really you're the traveling evangelist for the Braveheart life. Let's face it.
Yeah, I hope so.
What is it? Tell me what those appearances are like, why you're doing that. Why are you going town to town, telling these stories, your music? Tell me what it is and why you decided to undertake it.
I was really offended during the pandemic. I was offended by the fear that was prevalent among all of us, and particularly among our leaders, to separate people. Diseases are dangerous. They kill people all the time. I know we were uncertain how the pandemic was going to play out, but I didn't think it was going to wipe out the human race. I didn't think that we were designed to be that frail. And I wanted to get out in front of people. I decided that reaching people just through social media wasn't the way to reach people or to be reached by people. I wanted to have the experience like I had with that girl that stood up and gave me a gift that I never imagined getting, to tell me this is the power that Braveheart had for women. So like, I have got to get out of my comfort zone. And a friend of mine, I'd gone back to doing music because I had this experience that I had MRSA in my right hand, and the doctors had decided they're going to amputate my hand.
Oh my gosh.
And I mean, they had already decided it. It's Mayo Clinic. One of the physical therapists told me they had already had the meeting of what my post-amputation therapy was going to be.
Oh my Lord.
But this one doctor wouldn't give up. And he had a plan, and he found a way to save my hand, which involved taking an artery and a vein and a nerve out of my leg and weaving it into my hand. I went to bed one night thinking the next day they're going to amputate my hand, but I had a dream. And in the dream, I saw the Wallace family crest, which is a knight holding a sword cocked to strike. And in this dream, I was the knight. But instead of holding a sword, my fingers were pointing toward heaven. And they were the ones they were going to start the amputation with. And I woke up going, God's not going to take my hand. And when I came out of that, I decided I'm going to, instead of just like squeeze rubber balls and springs and things, I'm going to learn to play the piano. I bought a beautiful piano, began to practice every day. And a friend of mine said, if you want to be a musician, you have to play in front of people. So I wrote a show, and the show has clips from my movies and the stories about how I came to write those scenes. I tell some of the stories that we've shared today, and music that I wrote for my movies or about the themes that the movies are in. So it's a 90-minute, almost Broadway-like, I think Bruce Springsteen on Broadway. Of course, he's Bruce Springsteen and I'm not. But I have movies that people relate to and families could see together and draw from. So particularly love to go to schools. I went to Belmont University in Nashville. It was an incredible experience. And so we're touring around the country.
I love that. I love it. Well, I also love that it's full circle for you.
Yeah.
Because you're bringing the music, your stories, as well as the movies. I mean, it's really, and yourself. And there's something about live performance that is irreplaceable.
That's right.
Let's talk, before I go, there's an Arroyo Grande questionnaire I asked everybody. So forgive me, but this is rapid fire. Okay. Who's the person you most admire?
Besides Jesus, Davy Crockett.
Ooh, why?
A common man who had enormous challenges, was illiterate, raised by an alcoholic father who beat him and sold him into slavery when he was a child. He became a famed Indian fighter and then fought for the Indians. He was the only Tennessean in Congress who refused to vote for the removal of the Indians. And he had wit and courage, and he walked through the world alone.
That's a great character.
And I see that. And then my dad was from Lizard Lick, Tennessee. I relate to Davy Crockett, but yeah, Davy Crockett.
That should be your next movie.
It is.
Oh, it is? Are you working on it?
I'm working on right now a movie on the Swiss Guards, which we may shoot simultaneously in Rome with
some other movie?
With some other little movie.
Yeah.
It may, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm getting all kinds of news today. Yeah. Okay, what is your best feature?
My best personal feature?
Feature could be personal, could be physical, I don't care.
My best feature is my willingness to make a fool of myself.
Favorite book and last book you read?
My favorite book is, Charles Dickens, probably Great Expectations or David Copperfield. I love Dickens. The most recent book that I read is Rick Rubin's on creativity.
Oh, that's a great book.
It's awesome.
It's a great book. He's a great guy. What do you fear?
I fear fear. I fear listening to the fear is natural. Ernie Savage, who was the one of the heroes from We Were Soldiers, he went through an incredible physical horrors during that battle. And I asked him how he functioned amid all the terror. And he said, well, fear is your friend. Without fear, we would have never survived. It makes you alert. It makes you motivated. Fear is your friend. I know it can be. I know it also can eat you up. And I fear listening too much to fear. One of part of my daily mantra, I call it the daily prayers I say, is that I abandon fear. I know it's there, but I walk away from it.
What do you know that others don't, that no one else does? I know that's a crafty and wicked question.
Oh, boy, that is such a...
But it's a good one.
That's such a good one.
What do you know that others don't?
I know that within every one of us is a little boy or a little girl who needs to be embraced and loved. And there are other people that say those exact same words. It's just, how does it manifest? It's one of the reasons that, like, say, if I meet a woman in her 90s, I will kiss her hand. It's not the old woman whose hand is being kissed, it's that little girl. And that's something I know that other people don't seem to.
I love that. What's your biggest regret? Do you have one?
Regret. It's funny. I have moments that I regret the pain that something took, but to happen. A transition, a journey. I regret the pain that something that I might have been going through cost of other people, particularly the ones that I love the most. And at the same time, I really believe in the phrase "in the fullness of time," and that God's plan is better than mine. And so some of the things that I thought were the worst things that could happen proved to be the greatest blessings I could have. So I try to leave my regrets behind in the same way I try to leave fear behind.
What's the best piece of advice you ever received?
One of the most striking, other than my pastor saying, the greatest calling you can have is the one God has for you. One was Hal Moore. Hal would say over and over, follow your instincts. When I was directing We Were Soldiers, I was having Man in the Iron Mask. I was having a real challenge, and I knew Hal then, but I was having a real challenge. I was a first-time director, and all sorts of things were wrong. My marriage was in trouble. I was exhausted. I was the writer and director and producer of that movie. And any one of those jobs is enough to exhaust you and give you a nervous breakdown, but do all three at once, and that's hard. And then I had all these movie stars on the same movie, and it's my first job and all that. And I had some rebellions within the ranks because some of the people I felt resented. They had been in the movie business for 30 years, wanted to direct movies, and they had never gotten an opportunity. And I've written one movie. The fact that it was Braveheart didn't impress them. And now I'm directing Leonardo DiCaprio and John Malkovich and all the others.
Irons.
And I wrote Hal, and I said, what do you do when the people under you, I said, I can hang some people from the yard arm, but if a captain hangs too many of the crew, sooner or later people start to think, well, maybe the problem is the captain. What should I do? And Hal wrote me back and said, the job of any leader, the first job, is to grab your own morale by the scruff of the neck and lift it out of the mud. So stop complaining and start leading. That was pretty powerful advice.
And that's what you did.
That's what I did.
And created a heck of a movie, by the way.
Thank you.
What happens when this is over?
Wow. I don't even think about it. I really don't. I think it's that I'll die in the dirt, but my heart will be clean. And I'm prepared to die in the dirt.
Wow.
Yeah, well, I'm prepared.
I so enjoyed this.
Thank you, Raymond.
Thank you, my friend.
Such a joy always to see you. Thank you. You too, brother. Thank you.
So many revelations in that interview. I will never hear every man dies, but not every man really lives without thinking of Randy Wallace's mother. And I loved that line from Colonel Hal Moore, whom I knew. A leader's first job is to grab your own morale by the scruff of the neck and lift it out of the mud, so stop complaining and start leading. And the prayer Randy says before he writes, it is so important. But I do hate that he doesn't outline anything. Maybe that's why he's praying. And finally, abandon fear. It is the only true path to creativity. Arroyo Grande Travel is sponsored by our partners at Corporate Travel, celebrating 60 years facilitating exceptional faith, education, music, and family travel. Visit their website at ctscentral.net. I hope you'll come back to Arroyo Grande soon. Why live a dry, constricted life when if you fill it with good things, it can flow into a broad, thriving Arroyo Grande? I'm Raymond Arroyo. Make sure you subscribe, like this episode. Thanks for diving in, and we'll see you next time. Arroyo Grande is produced in partnership with iHeart Podcasts and is available on the iHeartRadio app or wherever you get your podcasts.